It's Tuesday, September 16th, and severe weather is going to make a return in a big way to the central plains today. We do have a marginal risk out here today. I do think this could be expanded a bit more westward into parts of Colorado as well. And then, of course, we just have that general threat for a lot of thunderstorms, which extends a lot of the US, including a couple of blotches out here in parts of Florida and even the mid Atlantic. Now, today's risk is mostly going to be fueled by that concerning threat of some 60 to potentially even 70-mile-an-hour damaging winds within our marginal risk area. And then that threat for hail is going to cover the same exact risk area, potentially seeing some 1 to 1.5 inch in diameter hail today. And accompanying our severe weather threat is, of course, going to be that tropical threat that we've been looking at the past couple of days. It has grown once again to a 90% chance of formation. It is almost entirely certain that we are going to see something with this, potentially even a tropical depression by the end of the week. Now, it is important to note that 90% doesn't mean that it is 100% going to form. Even last week, we saw a 90% chance of formation down here in the mid Atlantic, which completely dissolved. So it's still just a reminder that we are going to want to watch this very closely, even if it does form and if it doesn't. But the widespread consensus currently is that this is going to form into a storm. But luckily for us, the consensus with the models is that not only will it form into a storm, but it is likely going to make that big turn out into the Atlantic, not affecting the US. And it's also trending away from affecting Bermuda, but that's all going to depend on if a cold front or trough from the US can kind of swoop in and push it out back into sea in time. So as I go forward, we're going to look for that. And there it is. It's making that big turn out to the east, kind of coinciding with that cold front pushing off the US, almost punching it back out into sea. Now, this model run does have it turning into a category 4 hurricane nearing 933 millibars of central pressure. So it's still important to remember that this storm is going to be big and we do want to watch it. Just currently, the chance of this impacting the US is very, very low. But moving back to our severe weather threat out here in the central plains, we're going to want to look for an explosion of storms around the mid afternoon. And boom, right there it is. It goes from almost zero to a gigantic line of thunderstorms almost covering a big swath from Kansas all the way through Nebraska at around the mid to late afternoon hours. Additionally, we could see a lot of severe weather back here in portions of Colorado, I think, as well. And then the main threat with this is going to be some 60 to 70-mile-an-hour damaging wind gust and some small hail. That threat is mostly going to be limited by this linear mode. And even back here behind the cold front, in parts of Colorado, I think there is a non-zero chance of a couple of tornadoes because the cloud base will be low enough and the shear parameters will be a bit better back here. But I do think that chance is still going to be small. Now, this big, strong line of thunderstorms is mostly going to be initiated by a low pressure system and a trough moving through the region, as well as some frontal activity, mostly going to be a cold front. And it's actually going to push all the way into the night hours. We can see that's still going to be around when the low level jet kicks in, potentially increasing that threat for some damaging winds, hail, and even possibly a tornado or two, although that risk for tornadoes is going to be very small for a momentary period of time. But after the low level jet wraps up, it looks like these storms are going to be pretty much done by midnight, just becoming a rainy cluster rotating around that low pressure center in Nebraska. Now, I do want to take a look at a couple of other areas which I think could see some strong thunderstorms today. That's going to be further south in the upper plains, even going into parts of New Mexico. I do think we could see a lot of strong thunderstorms in the upper plains convergence zone, with a lot of convergence happening today with that westerly flow from that trough digging in. And moving to the complete opposite region of the country, up in the northern plains, there are a couple of areas which I do want to take a peek at also. We could see a line of thunderstorms potentially up here in northeastern Minnesota, also brought by that big trough and potentially kind of a remnant low from a system a day ago. And then also back here in parts of Montana, I also want to take a special look at that, or at least point it out, because this will likely be an area of increased thunderstorm activity brought by that trough as well. And the last area I want to take a peek at is going to be a very unique area of storms out here in the mid-Atlantic, mostly in the coastal Virginia and North Carolina region. It almost looks like we have a tropical system rotating right off the coast and then making landfall. This is actually not a tropical system, and it's just a closed low, although it is sort of tropical in nature. This will likely bring a lot of gusty winds to the region, as well as a big flooding threat. And here's that flood threat highlighted by the SPC excessive rainfall outlook, and right where our closed low is going to be coming onshore, we could potentially see 2 to 6 inches of rain brought by this. That's highlighted by that slight risk area. So that's definitely going to be something that you're going to want to look for if you're out here in the coastal mid-Atlantic today. Now back to what's causing all this. The main thing, of course, is going to be that big trough settled over parts of the Rockies and then kind of shooting out over the central and northern plains. That's going to bring a lot of forcing first storms. Of course, we'll have a couple of embedded short waves within there and a couple of embedded lows. And of course, that closed low over Virginia and North Carolina, bringing a lot of our rain in that system, almost tropical in nature, bringing some gusty winds and thunderstorms to the region today as well. And here's a better look at what the ingredients will be in that main risk area out in the central plains today, specifically in that marginal risk. We can see that we're actually going to have some higher cloud bases, quite a bit of dry air aloft, and then even a pretty low relative humidity. So all things which kind of scream a line or linear damaging wind threat. I think we'll definitely see some gusts in that 60 to 70 mile an hour range. Other things to know are going to be a pretty high 3 cape, a pretty high cape, and then also a somewhat moist environment. So definitely severe weather is going to be possible today. Now on the hail front, we have a pretty high low level lapse rate that's going to be conducive for some damaging winds. And then higher up, we have a pretty high mid-level lapse rate, 8.4 Celsius decreasing per kilometer. Quite a bit of cape up here near our freezing level, which isn't that high, but the main hindrance is going to be a linear storm mode and a lack of organizing shear, likely only seeing around 15 to 25 knots of organizing shear out here. So that will hinder that hail threat to likely only that 1 to 1.5 inch in diameter range. Now we do have a bit of wind veering, and because our 3 cape is a bit higher, I do think we could momentarily see a tornado threat when that low level jet kicks in. I also think the cloud bases will have been lowered a bit by that time because the cloud bases will be lowered by the overshooting cloud top in front of our line as it marches eastward. So I think that would be very momentary based on when the low level jet kicks in, but I still think it's going to be close to zero. And the main threat with this is just going to be some damaging winds and some large hail out here in the central plains.